Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Taiwan Creative Content Fest, Day 3. I am the moderator for today, Grace Lee from the Kaohsiung VR Film Lab. So what we have been doing is to incubate filmmaking and also content creation. In 2007, we started going into VR, starting the Kaohsiung Film Lab for VR. I myself am a filmmaker. And from filmmaking into XR, I would say it has been a fantastical journey. After entering the world of VR, I see that XR is not only used for creation, it's also related to our daily lives as a part of our lifestyle and also business models. There are a lot of archive materials, of cultural materials and contents that are used that are using XR. So I believe the development of XR will become a part of our lives that we can identify with. And I feel like XR may seem like a cutting-edge technology or like a jargon, but it is all about when we pursue interactive exchange, the new kind of lifestyle and experiences that it provides. And today we are very happy to have the movers and shakers in the world of XR to share with us their experience. So I'm sure all of you are looking forward to the program today. 2 reminders before we begin. First of all, like the other sessions, we have the session here on site, but also we are live streaming online. So for those of you that are watching online, you can raise your questions using our Slido system. And so for the Q&A at the end of this session, we will take your questions from Slido. Secondly, let me talk about the process of the session today. We'll hear from the 2 speakers who will present for 15 minutes each, and then we will have panelists who will be joining us here on site to share with us their feedback and comments. And without further ado, let's begin the first keynote for this morning. First of all, I'd like to invite Sandy Liu, who is Head of Engagement at Shape Immersive. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, everyone.
很高兴
It's a pleasure to have you today. I know that Shape Immersive in the past couple of years has assisted your clients in using AR and VR innovation in their fields. So I'm very curious to learn about your experience. So let me now turn the floor over to you, Sandy. Thank you.
Yeah. So I can get started. The presentation is in English because we also have some foreign audience here. So I will start now. And I'm very excited to be here today and honored and thankful for Taika's invitation to share with you today on my session on COVID's acceleration of a digital life and global opportunities for AR/VR startups. Yeah, so let's get started. So before we start, a little bit background about me. I'm Sandy, and as you can see from the slide of logos, my work spans across a spectrum of brands, technology companies, and cultural nonprofits. I've also worked across the globe, and I started my career in advertising and was a founding team member of TBWA Taiwan, helping them build their digital marketing department. After that, I moved to product marketing for software companies like Localytics and Adobe, where I worked on their ad tech product in Silicon Valley. After moving to Vancouver, I started a consultancy providing marketing and business strategy for products at the intersection of arts and tech. Now I primarily work as head of engagement for Shape Immersive, and we help retail organizations integrate 3D and AR to help them grow sales and virtualize experiences. So in my role, I manage our key accounts to make sure that the experiences we build is engaging to the users and serves our clients' business goals. And I'm also a Harvard MBA. So today, I'll be focusing on trends and opportunities for the AR/VR industry in times of COVID, what I've seen in the North American market, and some tips on how to foster a more vibrant community and ecosystem for XR. So COVID's acceleration of digital transformation really has two sides of it. One is consumers and one is companies. So on the consumer sides, because in North America, we're not as lucky, we are facing a lot of shutdowns and social distancing. And what that means is that how we work, eat, and play are gradually moving to a digital domain. So this has created, first of all, a lot of demand, but at the same time, a lot of exhaustion from online meetings. So we see a shift as well from in-store to online purchases for your everyday purchases, and an increased demand for content that allows live connectivity, because we're really missing that face-to-face interaction. And on the company side, what we see is, first of all, accelerated adoption for digital experiences. So the budget that we usually goes into physical events have moved to digitizing content. And secondly, you will see that there's a lot of future proofing that's happening to using digitization as a means to protecting core lines of businesses. So if we look at like the big tech companies in North America, so there's like Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, they all have significant investments in the VR AR space. So whether it is like VR goggles, AR Kit, AR Core, Visual Search, HoloLens, everything they are doing are tied to protecting their core businesses. And so that could be like ad revenues tied to search or social, or helping them sell hardware. Yeah. So if you're a vendor looking for clients that would be looking to invest and spend in the space, you have to look at and help your clients prove the case of how AR/VR technology can help them to protect their core business against unexpected future events such as COVID. So if we look at some stats here, this data is from an intelligence firm called Artillery, and they do a lot of the market sizing and analysis reports on the industry, and is a great resource for AR/VR market data. So in this graph, they show that as our lifestyle changes to be more digital, there's actually a lot of competition for attention, but AR experiences really grabs people's attention. AR influenced purchases is forecasted to grow to 36 billion USD in 2024. So that is really massive. On the other hand, if we look at the mobile ad revenue, so even in COVID, when companies are slashing marketing budget left and right, AR advertising spending has actually grown. So this is due to social platforms like Instagram and TikTok launching AR ad programs. And these social platforms are not only seeing high engagement, but also making it very easy on the ad creation front to create 3D ad experiences with tools like Facebook's Spark AR. So if we look at some examples here, we can see how AR is really being integrated into our everyday lives. So on the very left, you see Snapchat's virtual try-ons. It shows up right in our social feed, and you can access engaging ad content right there, where you can try on these shoes, you can change colors, you can see how it really looks like on your feet. In the middle, we see is Mira, and this is a startup that is acquired by Lululemon. So that's an athletic brand that started in Vancouver. And these are like smart mirrors that potentially you can have a digital coach that's working out with you, and they could see how you're performing. And at the same time, it has a lot of potential to be able to add product try-ons straight into your home. So imagine you can like work out, and then you can be able to see some products that you might need. And then not even going into the store, you can try it on to see what it looks like on you. On the right-hand side, you see Google's visual search. So we know that they have a lot of investments in this space where they're really looking into creating that the search of capabilities where you can point at something and you can get that data. Right now, it's about the restaurants, but we can see that expanding to a lot of the retails and commercial stores, or even tourist attractions. Yeah. So that looks really flashy, but is it a gimmick? So sometimes I still get this question, and people see young people with cat ear filters and rainbows coming out of their mouths, and they ask whether or not AR is just a gimmick. But the truth is it really works. And these are statistics from Shopify. So they're an e-commerce platform that supports more than 1 million businesses. And we can see that if you have a 3D model there and allow the users to interact with it, they have a 44% more likely chance to add it to cart. And that translates to 27% more chance of them actually purchasing. And what's even more impressive is that those who interacted with 3D models were up to 250% more likely to buy than those who did not. So now that we know that the technology is there is demand and there is business case for continuous growth. How do we capture this opportunity? So beyond focusing on retail customers, our team at Shape also puts a lot of work into growing the community. When we talk about community leadership, Shape's two founders, so that's Alex, Dan, and I frequently organize events and speak at conferences like these. Dan Berger is also the president of the VR AR Association's Vancouver chapter. And Alex Trong, who is also Taiwanese, is also the founder of Launch Academy, and they are a leading startup incubator in Vancouver. So they have launched a MAPLE program, which helps tech companies expand their business to North America and support their access to Canadian work visas. And this brings me to the broader tech ecosystem at Vancouver. So first of all, we are the #2 VR AR hub in the world after Silicon Valley. And we are the #1 special effects hub in the world. We also see exponential growth from 15 to 260 XR companies within 5 years. And for the VR AR ecosystem, we also benefit from a 40-year legacy in film, TV, special effects, gaming, and tech. And we see 3D development creating lots of jobs and drove like $2.3 billion in revenue. So this sounds like it's all great. And it's like, we have really good infrastructure, but building an ecosystem really takes serious work and comes with its challenges. Right. So I'm going to talk about what it takes to build a thriving ecosystem. And this is how I would break it down. So it takes 4 main components to work together. One is talent. The second is investors. Third is demand. And fourth is policies and community support. So if we look at starting with talent, these stats that I'm showing here came from a report that's done by the VR AR Association and the Vancouver Economic Commission. So they did a survey interviewing XR companies in the province of British Columbia in Canada. And these stats show that having qualified STEM candidates is important. And it's forecasted to have a growing demand for such talent. So for companies to have job openings as well, they need capital to grow. So this brings us to the challenges for companies to raise capital. So we look at this stat here, we see that about 50% of the companies in BC have under 50,000 in investment. And over those with over 1 million in capital investments are only about 22%. So that really shows that even with a vibrant ecosystem here, we are still experiencing some challenges with regards to getting investment. So if we look at, okay, if you don't have investments, then you would probably try to rely on some revenue sources, right? So in the revenue sources, we can see that the breakdown of it, half of it comes from international sources. And this is why we need to think about global opportunities, especially regions with smaller domestic demand like that of Taiwan as well. The more diverse the markets for revenues, the more likely the potential for continued growth. So not just on the demand side, but on the supply side as well. At Shape, we also work with production teams that are in Europe and in Taiwan. So that is something that companies should be thinking about using the global supply chain or economy. And lastly, policies and community support is what fills in the gaps. So support should be in place to help with matchmaking for companies to find talent, investors, and customers. And Vancouver, our ecosystem is strong with a lot of community initiatives, but we still see gaps in investment, corporate matchmaking, and government support. So moving on, we're looking at these two graphs. So one of it is the Gartner's hype cycle, and that's mapped to the bottom one, which is the tech adoption life cycle, where we can see probably around 5 years ago, we were at that peak of inflated expectation for XR. But I believe we are past the trough of disillusionment with devices that are ready to move us to the next step. And we are moving towards the early majority, especially for AR. For startups, the key is to really not die on the slope, right? So to not die. So what are the opportunities here? And as startups, we don't have all the resources in the world. So many of the companies that I see that are struggling puts too much focus on what's cool. So of course, that is fun to talk about, but that doesn't help us secure clients, pay for salaries, build traction and demand to get us to the next stage. So I want to focus on talking about the barriers of widespread adoption of AR and VR and why I believe we're at the brink of making it the next TV, computer, or cell phone, but we're not quite there yet. So it's about understanding, really, that we're trying to collectively grow a three-sided market. And what I mean by that is it's devices, content, and demand. And if any one of this is not present, you as a startup have not reached product market fit, and it will be very hard to get any real adoption. So if you're lacking any of these categories, where are the lower hanging fruits? So I want to share some areas of opportunities I see. First of all, the advancement in devices have really opened up the opportunities because devices are becoming more untethered, it's lighter, it's more affordable, and you really don't need a gaming PC in order to support it. So it's really maturing to be more accessible. And on the other hand, we have 5G support happening. And also there are 1.5 billion users on devices and platforms that are already AR ready. And on the content side, what really accelerated AR adoption was Pokemon Go, right? So we can debate whether it is true AR, but the learning here is that we need killer content. And I see two areas where adoption can take off. And one is social platforms that we have talked about before. And the second one is around product visualizations and visual search. So if you look at the stats here, you can see there's a significant jump in these two categories. And what that means is that these are content around where people can configure a car that they like to purchase or see objects in 3D or do virtual try-ons. Or test out how furniture will look like in their houses. Yeah. And beyond that, enterprise use cases is still growing. It has been maturing earlier than consumer use cases, but we see that that is continuously to have that demand. So verticals-wise, we see gaming, retail, healthcare, and training continuously to be thriving and growing. And secondly, we see a huge surge of demand from brands and advertisers, both in 3D digital experiences, creating that experience, but also ad spend, because they are now seeing that huge ROI that I talked about earlier. Yeah, so of course, not limiting to this, I have a short time today, so I just covered kind of the highlights. You might have noticed that I focus more of my talk on AR, and this is because what I see is that it has bigger immediate growth potential and lower barrier to entry. So this is not to say that there isn't a lot of growth potential in VR as well, but that might be a talk for another time. And I want to leave you with this ray of hope from this PwC report. And it's saying that the VR AR industry have the potential to deliver a $1.5 trillion boost to the global economy by 2030. So I hope you're in for the ride and hope to see you all soon on the other side. So that will conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Sandy， 带来非常精彩的非常。
Thank you, Sandy. That was very, very exciting. And it allowed us to understand Shape Immersive in more depth. We will have a chance to also ask questions of Sandy. The next speaker, because she is in another continent, she's unable to be here online, but she has already recorded her presentation. Our speaker is Ms. Katie Price. She is the head of digital media at the Victoria and Albert Museum. There is a very exciting exhibit at the V&A called Curious Alice, so we're very pleased to hear from Katie.
Due to the global situation. So, by way of a brief introduction, I'm Katie Price and I head up digital media and publishing at the Victoria and Albert Museum. That means I look after the V&A's digital presence, from overseeing our online activity to developing compelling digital experiences within our museums. We create content that tells the stories of our incredible collections online and increasingly use digital technologies to tell those stories in our buildings too. For those who are less familiar with the V&A, we're the world's leading museum of art, design and performance. We have 3 museums in the UK, in South Kensington in London, and also the Museum of Childhood in Bethnal Green, also in London, as well as the V&A in Dundee in Scotland. We also have the V&A Gallery at Design Society in Shenzhen in China, and we're currently building 2 new sites in the Olympic Park in East London, a new museum and a collections research centre. Our permanent collection comprises over 2.3 million objects that span over 5,000 years of human creativity. And the museum holds many of the UK's national collections and houses some of the greatest resources for the study of architecture, furniture, fashion, textiles, photography, sculpture, painting, jewellery, glass, ceramics, book arts, Asian art and design, and theatre and performance. Today, I'd like to tell you a bit about some of our recent work that explores how we use immersive technologies to help bring these collections to life. But before I do, I'd like to travel back a few hundred years, back to the 19th century to Victorian Britain. Immersive technologies are nothing new. Today's fascination with immersive and mixed reality technologies draws on a long history of optical devices that help bring exciting stories and environments to life. Paper peep shows are one such technology and had their heyday in the mid-19th century at a time when optical devices were all the rage. The trend began in Austria and Germany and quickly spread to France and England. Often produced cheaply, they would be sold as souvenirs at popular travel destinations or as substitutes for experiencing the real thing. For the viewer today, they are playful and interactive time-travelling devices which highlight the kinds of attractions that thrilled people at the time. Up until the late 19th century, you could also encounter travelling peep show men at towns and fairs across the country. Equipped with large peep show boxes, they would charge adults and children to look inside the box, while commenting on the scene depicted and bringing it to life. This satirical print shows a man so absorbed in the spectacle that he doesn't realise that his pockets are being picked. So what exactly is a paper peep show? Paper peep shows are like miniature worlds unfolding before your eyes. In an instant, you're brought to a festival, a historical event, a faraway land, a battlefield, or a biblical scene. The scenes are colourful and action-packed. As they recede into the distance, they create an illusion of depth. Consisting of a front and a back panel with cut-out prints in between, linked by bellows on the sides or at the top and bottom, the peep show looks like a stretched-out concertina when open, but when closed, you would never guess the wonders it contains. The V&A holds the world's largest and most comprehensive collection of paper peep shows assembled by Jacqueline and Jonathan Gestetner and gifted to the museum in 2016. The collection includes over 360 paper peep shows along with other optical pastimes. It spans nearly 300 years and 12 different countries from Canada to China. The collection's subject matters run from the surreal to the sensational, the everyday to the heroic. For the last 3 centuries, these imaginative keepsakes have provided adults and children alike with a source of inexpensive, immersive entertainment, the virtual reality of their time. The art of paper peep shows and paper theatre hold a fascination for contemporary Icelandic artist Christiana S. Williams. We invited Christiana to create a book of illustrations to accompany the V&A's upcoming exhibition, Alice, Curiouser and Curiouser, exploring its origins, adaptations and reinventions over 157 years. This immersive and theatrical exhibition will chart the evolution of Alice's adventures in Wonderland from manuscript to a global phenomenon beloved by all ages. Christiana was a natural choice to work with on the accompanying book. Her work blends traditional Victorian engravings with digital collage techniques to create layered landscapes full of hidden details. Christiana's digital collages for the book became the starting point for the development of a new immersive experience to accompany the exhibition. Her illustrations are packed with fantastic details, and from both an artistic and an experiential perspective, it made complete sense to start here. Working with this surreal suite of Victorian-inspired artworks, we partnered with HTC Vive Arts, an immersive games studio preloaded to create a unique experience that would reward curiosity, exploration, and imagination, key themes from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland story, and also celebrate the power of storytelling and digital innovation. Why Alice? As Kate Bailey, the curator of the exhibition, explains, since their creation, the Alice books, with their mind-blowing ideas and concepts, have been a source of inspiration for new technologies from silent film to CGI. And so, we set about extending Alice's adventures into a new virtual reality. The result, Curious Alice, a virtual reimagining of Wonderland, invites you to step into Alice's shoes and tumble down the rabbit hole, embarking on your own curious adventure. It was a fascinating creative journey that we went on with HTC Vive Arts and Preloaded, and I'd like to share some of the key things we learnt along the way when bringing Wonderland to life in VR. When exploring how any technology works, you need to understand its affordances. Coined by James J. Gibson in 1966, affordance is what the environment offers the individual. One of the key affordances VR offers is the sense of presence, the feeling of actually being there. For us, VR offered an incredible opportunity to make the player feel like they're actually in Wonderland. No exhibition, no film, no computer game can genuinely transport you into a world in this way, not to the extent that you actually feel that you're there. As I touched on earlier, Wonderland as a concept has often been used as a way of describing the ability of technology to give this sense of travelling to a different place and time. This sense of presence is something we really focused on in the creation of our VR experience, Curious Alice. We took 3 scenes from the Alice in Wonderland book and turned them into 3 interactive chapters. After tumbling down the rabbit hole, you arrive in this hallway. By interacting with the different objects in the box, a glove, a pipe, and the iconic Drink Me bottle, you are transported into the 3 intriguing worlds in which those chapters are set. Virtual reality also offers the ability for the player to change size and perspective. Given Alice's shrinking and expanding in the original Wonderland story, we realised VR gives us a unique way for people to feel what it was like to be in Alice's shoes and to experience this discombobulating feeling. At the beginning of the experience, the player feels what it's like to fall down the rabbit hole. They also get to sip from the famous Drink Me bottle and find themselves shrinking rapidly. In this chapter, they find themselves overwhelmed by a forest of mushrooms as they, like Alice, encounter the hookah-smoking caterpillar. Having played the experience several times now, I can't overemphasize how thrilling it is to suddenly find yourself small and lost in this intriguing world. Christiana herself said it was incredible to see how honestly VR rendered this layered, colourful world and brought it to vivid life. Another affordance of virtual reality is, of course, around gesture and manipulation. Manipulating objects in 3-dimensional space gives the player unprecedented personal control or agency over the environment. For Curious Alice, we created a number of objects that the player would handle, each with different gestures, from waving a lantern to finding the rabbit's lost glove, to manipulating the caterpillar's smoke rings to solve his complex riddles. For each chapter, we honed the interactive gestures to feel right within the environment. For this chapter, the Queen's Croquet Ground, we spent a lot of time creating and testing the right gestures for the player to play a bonkers game of croquet that involved throwing hedgehogs through these hoops. I look back fondly on the huge amount of time we spent perfecting hedgehog physics. But it's not just about embracing the affordances of VR. As we found out, you need to embrace its constraints too. The VR experience, because of the constraints within the physical space of the Alice exhibition, is a seated experience. So we had to carefully craft the boundaries of that experience while not letting the player feel that they're not able to fully explore the environment. Our main challenge was how to transform Christiana's flat drawings into a 3-dimensional world. For example, In this chapter, there are pieces of furniture and other household items that needed to have a sense of form and depth in VR, allowing a player to look around them. They needed to be modelled into a 3D mesh. This involved some creative interpretation to create 3D versions of 2D illustrations. For extra believability, we created a custom shader to emulate light and shadows on each object, displaying these tones as etched lines in keeping with the original Victorian prints from which Christiana created her illustrations. Bringing all these elements together and set dressing each scene allowed us to transport players into the illustrations in real time. What initially felt like a constraint turned into the very USP of the experience, a way of virtually rendering the digitally rendered illustrations, building them out into a three-dimensional 360-degree experience. The lessons we've learnt about how to bring these illustrations to life through VR gives us important insights into how we might further use immersive technologies to help people engage with the V&A's collections. We're now brimming with ideas of how to use the affordances of VR to help people explore the objects in our collection, enabling them to touch, feel, and connect with those objects in a way they simply cannot do in real life, giving them a sense of presence of the times and the places in which those objects have existed, and helping to create a new sense of perspective and scale that we simply can't do in our galleries. This is just the beginning of our journey with VR, a journey that stems from the Victorian world of paper peep shows and other optical trickery that has helped people across the centuries and generations delve into new worlds and new experiences. And so to end, I'd like to share with you the trailer for our new VR experience, Curious Alice.
In Wonderland, nothing is as it seems. Use your senses to complete curious challenges. Race against the clock to capture the white rabbit's missing glove. Explore fantastical landscapes. Solve the caterpillar's mind-bending riddles. Defeat the Queen of Hearts in a curious game of croquet. Reward your curiosity. Discover your Wonderland.
Thanks to HTC Vive Arts for their generous support and to the team at Preloaded for all their creative and technical expertise. And last of all, thanks to my brilliant colleagues at the V&A for all their insight and knowledge to help explore new ways to reveal the incredible world of Wonderland. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. I really agree with what she said. We see a lot of familiar content made into VR. So I think compared to original work, if we're able to convert it or compared to new work, if we can convert old content into VR, that would be extremely interesting. I myself just had the experience with Curious Alice, and it was so magical because I read Alice in Wonderland as a young girl, and I could really experience it for myself today, to experience going from really small to really huge. So thank you, Katie, for the presentation. Let's now move into the panel discussion. So please join me to welcome the panelists that are here with us today. Please take your seats. Let me introduce the panelists that are on stage. First of all, we have Selena Ye, Acting Director at Vive Arts. Hello, everybody. And we also have James Lee, founder of J-Reach, Trip Moment. And we have Jason Wong, co-founder of VAR Live. After Sandy's presentation, we heard about her experience and her company. But I'd like to ask the three panelists here for them to share with us on what they're doing. So maybe I can ask Jason to share first. For the panelists on stage, they were involved in the XR industry a long time ago. So VAR has been in gaming and also interactive gaming and content for a long time. And some of their projects have been in the VR film labs in Kaohsiung. So Jason, could you talk a little bit about how you got started in VAR in your company? We went into VR in 2013. In the beginning, we had physical shops in department stores, and we developed our own products. And many of our products are of the horror genre because that's what the younger generation likes today. So ever since then, up until today, it's been about 6 to 7 years already. And we are now expanding into large theme parks to provide digital content. And we're working with theme parks outside and inside Taiwan. Using VR technology, we've gone beyond, we've gone into VR gaming. And I would say, we are still a blank canvas in that regard, from software to hardware to global communities to growing the market. I think we chose the hardest field to go into, but you've been quite successful in terms of hardware integration to content development. All of that is done by you. And when we support Taiwanese directors in making VR films, we show them a lot of VR projects. And I think we took 2 of the Taiwanese directors for them to see your projects. And I think those projects are absolutely amazing. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about content creation in a little bit. And also for James, for VR, it's 360 degrees and people can move while gaining a sense of presence. How do you combine that to traveling? I know that for you, you went into VR tourism or traveling from a long time ago, and you also have this experiential site in Taipei, right? So how did you come up with this project? Well, let me first talk about why I wanted to combine VR and travel. As Sandy has said, VR provides a sense of presence, as also Katie said. So the first time that we encountered VR, I think it was back in 2014. It was Oculus DK1 back at the time with a lot of cords. And after playing it, I was just blown away. I knew that this technology would subvert the travel industry because you really feel like you are there in person. And traveling is all about experience and a sense of presence. So us in the travel industry, we all know that not everybody has the luxury of time or money or health to be able to travel. And for VR, if we can use it well, it can make up for some of the gaps in traveling. Traditionally, you would think that traveling is expensive, but you can't do it that frequently. Perhaps it's once a year. Only about 30% of the Taiwanese travel outside the country twice a year. You need to spend maybe 50,000 NT dollars on average. That's higher than the monthly salary here. So it's relatively an expensive entertainment. However, through VR, through software and content development, we are able to offer the users the fun or the pleasure of traveling without spending so much money and time. And a lot of people may ask, will virtual traveling replace real traveling? I think not to that extent, because traveling is a continuous experience from suffering the painful experience or going through the painful experience of being on an airplane, eating the bad plain meals, and then you arrive at the destination. It's just like hiking up a mountain. You need to go through the painful process to be able to enjoy the pleasure. So for VR travel and real travel, I would say they are the two ends of a spectrum. So that's why we were interested in getting involved. We wanted to generate new demand and also to make up for some of the gaps in the market. Thank you. I'm quite curious. For your consumers, what is their experience with you? But let's come back to that later. And now I'd like to invite Selena to talk about Vive Arts. You got involved in VR quite early, and you work with renowned museums. For example, museums like the Louvre in Paris, or for example, for Curious Alice, that's something that you worked on as well. So talk about Vive Arts and what you have been doing in the past couple of years. You probably all know HTC Vive, and you may think that we focus on the hardware or the equipment. But as Sandy said, we knew from early on that for this industry, it's all about building an ecosystem. So when we develop the hardware, we also have an online platform as well as content creation. And content development can be divided into different fields or dimensions. The most well-known of which is gaming, but we know that we need to develop consumer demand. So starting in 2017, after HTC Vive Arts was established, we've been creating or developing cultural content. And we've worked with well-known museums like Tate Modern or the Louvre. For museums, VR is a new way of storytelling. For curators, in the beginning, they're amazed by this kind of technology and they're curious. And they later learn about how VR is a way of storytelling, especially for a lot of the classic objects. We talked about travel just now. Not everybody can travel to these international museums, but VR provides a great channel for people in different places to have that experience. And the value that is added is that there are different ways of experiencing. It's not just about seeing the artwork. Many museums may ask the question, will that replace the experience of actually visiting a museum? I don't think so. Because for a lot of the museums, they would feel like VR technology is to provide added value so that the viewers get to know more in depth about their objects and artworks. And when we work with contemporary artists, we can adopt VR as well for them to use it as a means or a tool. So this is something that we are working on as well. I am also curious to know that when you work with artists for projects such as Curious Alice, because it's such a classic story. So when you do the adaptation, I think you've talked about different ways of working with it in adaptation. How did you decide on the final content? And also when you designed the VR experience, what were the focus or what was the highlight?
Based on our experience,
他们是主要说故事的人，他们不一定是对科技最了解。
Some people are the storytellers, but they may not know the technology that well, so that's how we work together. So the idea is that for the people that are most familiar with the content or the cultural assets, they need to think about how to tell a story from using VR, and they may come up with a framework or a structure, and we provide technology support to enable that. And also there's involvement from the studio. They are more of an art director. They know what kind of effects VR can create. So in the exhibition, we also provide hardware and support. So it's a triangular kind of teamwork. So that is a collaboration model that we've developed throughout the year. So people will use their expertise and come together, be it Mona Lisa or Alice in Wonderland. That's how we were able to come up with the project. But it's all about teamwork and about coordinating between parties.
大家的
I think this is definitely a new field, so there's a lot of learning that we can derive from each other. When we talk about tourism, how do you decide what you want people to experience? How do we choose? Well, I think when we're designing content, we have a few ideas. The first important idea is what would consumers want to experience personally if they were there? Because sometimes we see VR, AR for the sake of VR, AR. For example, tourism operators, they will just take a camera and then shoot wherever they are, and perhaps all you hear about is 360 degrees of a certain place, but nobody's really interested in that location. So when we travel, we're not just interested in scenery. I think what's important is the whole experience, interaction, culture. So I can cite a real example. I remember when we first started, we wanted to showcase Taiwan. And later we discovered that what we were showing was so boring that nobody was really interested in viewing it. So in 2015, we had this idea we're going to have a proposal where someone is going to travel with you throughout Taiwan. So this person was going to be a very hot babe, a beautiful girl who's going to accompany you throughout your travels. And actually, everybody loved this idea of a young, beautiful girl who was taking you around Taiwan, showing you the sunset in Danshui. And actually, some girls, our consumers told us they wish that there was a hot guy who could be their guide. So it's important to understand what people are looking for, what are the objectives of traveling. So what we did was we took the idea of going on a date and merged it with travel. After a few more years, we wanted to do something even more exciting. So we took computer graphics and we merged it with AR, VR. So in addition to the 360 experience, there was a lot of interaction. And if you go to VR 101, I forget whether it's on National Geographic Channel or on the Discovery Channel, you will be able to see how within a 360 environment, you will be able to see the sky lantern from Taiwan, and you can actually light it and see it virtually go up in the sky. So the design of the content is critical. We need to really step in the shoes of the consumer. What kind of travel experience am I drawn to? What kind of travel experience leaves me feeling very happy, as if I found something that I was looking for? We don't just want to provide an experience. We really feel that it's important to bring in design elements. A lot of people worry that VR is going to replace our everyday behavior or things that we like to do. I don't believe so, because I think even in the VR realm, we crave human interaction. When you design experiences with a lot of people, do you also sense that? I think it's better to put it this way. Whatever experience, whether we're talking about VR or a movie, it's very important to feel your presence in the scenario. If you don't feel your own presence, it's very difficult to feel a sense of engagement. So I think if we're going to talk about VR, I think what the consumer is craving is not really that he was there or she was there. Rather, what they hope to fulfill is something that they couldn't do in real life, but was made possible through VR. You won't be able to really, in real life, go on a date with a very hot girl, go somewhere in Taiwan, or you won't be able to really go with a mountaineering group to scale Mount Everest. A lot of people are afraid of diving because they're scared of going deep into the ocean. But through VR, even if you have a fear of water, you can still go and dive. So I feel that, in a sense, VR has broken that threshold that existed in the past. Experiences that you couldn't actually experience, but now through VR, you can actually experience them. That's very true. I hear this from my friends a lot as well. I think the best 360 degree program was actually one that was related to many people. It's more of a horror experience. But I think this year, for us, there's a Apollo moon mission themed VR product that actually was most popular amongst our consumers. And when we asked them, why did you choose this theme? They told us this is something that I would never be able to do in real life. As you mentioned, scaling Everest. So I think that is a key to allow users to experience something they never would have before. Another topic I would like to talk about is in developing VR, you obviously go through several stages of development. And we know that some experiences allow 8 people to experience. So I think that is quite amazing. And sometimes if people are on a date, there's also this VR experience that you've dated where you have to hold the hand of the person with you. So this also creates a dating environment. It's very popular. Yeah, that's true. Actually, this game has to do with adventure. But we thought just a mere adventure game was not sufficient. We wanted to have some dangerous elements. For example, the floor would be uneven, so you may fall. And sometimes because you are on such uneven ground, you need to hold on to each other for safety. So this is a game where this is the premise we built it on. And it was mentioned before that when we explore VR, a very important element in order to popularize VR is how to make the user feel his or her presence. And we can see that for a long time, this was an obstacle. We couldn't find a good way of solving this. I think gaming is one area that's been more or less more successful. For example, there have been some killer applications. We know that some examples exist, but this is still a rare model. So when we are developing VR products, we want to make sure that there is some interaction. Right now, you have actually experiences where you can have 20 people. Many of these VR experiences in amusement parks are for multi-parties. And we also want to think about whether it can be commercialized or used in industry. For example, working with, as I mentioned, amusement parks or some entertainment activities where we can introduce VR. And it's important that it's not a very expensive undertaking, but it can generate a lot of positive experience. We know that you've started to partner with companies in promoting VR experiences. You mentioned amusement parks. We know that amusement parks are very interested in VR. I think rather than amusement parks, most of our partners are overseas. I remember 3 years ago in Kaohsiung, there was a VR amusement park, and they had 4 major themed areas, and 3,200 people would go through this amusement park per day. Another example is in Hualien. There is a indoor VR amusement park in Hualien. And recently in Liufu Amusement Park, we also have a 4-themed VR experience activity. The good thing about working with amusement parks is sometimes for them to build certain facilities, it takes a year in order to construct it, pass all the safety regulations. But when it comes to digital activity, it's really, really quick to make possible. So, of course, I need to thank HTC for having the best hardware out there. So for amusement parks, we can set up very quickly, and the content can be constantly renewed. So this is something that I see a huge demand in. Of course, you need to have great stories that you can tell in these VR experiences. Currently, I think we've had quite a lot of collaboration with amusement parks where we try and educate amusement parks so that they know that VR is really viable. The reason why I say we need to do this education work is because a lot of people, they don't understand that VR can be a standalone experience. They often think it has to be roller coaster plus VR. When you do that, sometimes you actually have the problem of dizziness, people feeling really, really dizzy. But you can actually just have a simple standalone VR experience. So a lot of amusement parks need to be educated about how VR can work for them. So in the last few years, we've had a few successful projects, and people now understand that VR is just a technology. In the past, before we knew about VR, we didn't think very highly of it because there were lots of problems with it. But now it's actually more and more mature. You mentioned the issue of dizziness and public perception. And Sandy also talked about in her presentation the development of AR. I'm very curious when we're talking about AR and VR. A lot of people have this sense that AR seems to be more accessible. VR, there is still this all the equipment, and it's harder. So, Sandy, you mentioned you actually think VR has a very good future ahead of it. So, in your company, Shape Immersive, how do you see the future development of VR?
我觉得现在就是还
I think because of COVID-19, so for clients, they are more conservative about what to work on or develop. So I would say the direct opportunities, as Jason has said, are what kind of models can make things more popular. And AR is easily proven for consumers. If you don't buy something, businesses don't get the revenue. So perhaps it's a kind of advertising business model. And there are more and more businesses seeing potential for AR. But for VR, relatively speaking, is not as accessible. When I was working at Adobe, they were already working on ads in a VR environment. That could be an opportunity there. However, because of the COVID situation overseas, it's still quite bad. And I touched upon this earlier. To prove something to be worthy of investment, to have startups like us work on a project, this needs to be connected to the client's bottom line, either making money for the client or saving money for the client. So for a VR project, it's usually with larger institutions or companies. For example, if a hospital is trying to cut the cost of surgery, they could adopt VR, or for companies in developing new products, they could use VR to create an environment for simulation so that they can save more money. So for projects like these, and I think they could prove to be more feasible. For me, VR has two different models of development. One is like the candy, the other the painkiller. So the painkiller is to deal with the productivity issues or the pain points. So for enterprise use cases, if the enterprise is able to meet their demand or gap in deficiency or inefficiency because of VR, they would adopt it. But the other is candy or carrots. That would be like gaming. So the consumers are attracted to the content that is appealing and they're willing to spend. So what is missing there is for the VR industry to thrive. Headsets need to be popularized. So equipment is definitely an entry barrier. For equipment to become popularized, we need for the general public not to take painkillers or candies, but actually to consume food. So there needs to be attractive use cases so that the general public are interested in getting the equipment. They may not be a gamer. There needs to be an incentive for them to have that equipment. So at this stage, our company strategically, we decided to start from AR. And I think in terms of VR, I think COVID has definitely boosted VR. When it comes to working remotely, VR can solve a lot of our problems. And I think it's very much like when the computer first came into the marketplace. In the beginning, we may not have computers at home, so we may have to go to the library to use a computer. And I also work with culture and also technology. I feel like VR headsets need to be popularized first in, for example, public spaces for people to have access. So for our business, we've been thinking about how we can promote the popularization of VR headsets, be it in libraries or museums, where the general public can have access to them. So in marketing events or consumer-facing events, we may have access to VR headsets. And when people see how useful they can be, I think they'll be drawn to it. Right, you talked about COVID, and I'm quite curious to know, for James, has the COVID-19 boosted your business in VR? Yes, definitely. From 2015 and 16, we've been thinking about promoting VR tourism, and nobody paid attention to us. But that's changed today because people are seeing the demand due to COVID-19. Sandy talked about how in VR, there's a kind of distance between VR and also the users. And for your space, In the beginning, you only offered VR, but now you offer other types of programs. So that's the way I feel too. For VR to become a part of people's lives, it shouldn't be isolated. So when you do business, do you only provide VR experiences, or do you provide a kind of comprehensive experience? I think this is based on our takeaways or learnings. We are a pretty digital company. We haven't really offered many physical experiences, and we operate differently from Jason's company because they focus on gaming. But for us, we're more about future applications of VR. We are a showroom that demonstrates how users or travelers can gain that VR experience. And we're trying to experiment and explore what the philosophy in the market is. So when we're trying to grow our user base, the consumers are not here for VR per se. They're here for a fun time in which they can social with their friends. So it should not be about the VR experience alone. It needs to provide more social value. There needs to be something more on top of the VR experience. So perhaps we'll have a small bar, dining and storytelling, sharing sessions. And I think every Wednesday we have this tarot fortune teller. So I try to create a space that can become a part of users' lives. So if we combine the social element to VR, it can become a more integrated part of your life. So if you go out for a drink, maybe you can get the VR experience along the way. Or if you go to this tarot session, you can get the VR experience along the way. And this year, we've done a comprehensive review. And I think VR will become a part of the homes today sooner than we think. Because for VR headsets, in the past, it was maybe 80,000 NT dollars. And now it's like 300 US dollars, less than 10,000 New Taiwan dollars. So what was considered as luxury before is no longer the case. VR devices are now much cheaper. We just need these killer applications and killer content. Just as what Sandy was saying, why should consumers buy the device or the equipment? So it's not because consumers don't have the access. They just don't know why they need those equipments. And there's a field that we've been neglecting, and that is the porn industry. We feel like the killer application in VR is the porn industry. VR, when applied to the pornography industry, I would say will become the mainstream or the majority. It will replace 2D videos with higher resolution and better content. I would say the desire of humankind is so strong. And if you have the device at home, you'll explore other kinds of uses. If you have the goggle, you can consume not just pornography, but also other types of content. I'm just saying that this is an entry into VR, not the only one. Some people are interested in Half-Life, so they start with gaming. Or maybe they start using VR because they want to consume pornography. So how do you help creators to come up with quality VR content? I think is the key. What do you think, Celine? You work with culture and the arts. So that's different from the entertainment industry. For it to become popularized, you need to work harder. So what is your view of the VR market when it comes to culture and the arts? When it comes to developing content for culture and the arts and in the application of VR for our institutions. I think it has a lot to do with education. And what we do will be applied to education in the future. So we're working with different schools. There are schools and classrooms that are now installing VR classrooms. Immersive content used in education works extremely well compared to reading text or watching videos. Studies have shown that immersive experiences leave a better impression in the minds of students. And for galleries, because of COVID-19, we see that a lot of exhibitions or art shows or commercial galleries have now been shut down. So we're seeing the demand being created for virtual galleries. For trade in the arts, you need to see the artworks. So that's where I think the potential lies for VR going forward. I'd also like to ask Sandy, for Shape Immersive, you talked about VR applications and some of your ideas. And you talked about how Vancouver is the second largest hub for XR. What is the Canadian perspective on the future of the XR market? First of all, Vancouver is the third largest city in Canada, so not the largest. And in terms of the Canadian population, if we compare it to the US, it's much smaller in terms of market scale. And because I used to live in Silicon Valley and also Boston, and also New York, and those hubs have this kind of aggregation effect of talent and also resources. And each city has its strength. And Vancouver, I would say, is a hub that has developed in the past decade or so. Relatively speaking, Silicon Valley is already quite crowded. There are many businesses, and they compete with each other. Businesses are competing for capital and product as well as talent. But because for Vancouver, it is still growing, so people know what it is that they lack and what it is that they have. And there are people wanting to do many different things, but we may lack the capital or the policies. In terms of talent, we may have to work with universities to make up for the gap. So businesses work together, and the Vancouver government realizes that this is a city for retirement because of its beautiful scenery, and it also has close ties to Asia. So for a lot of Asians, they move to Vancouver after they retire. So I would say the industry is not thriving at the moment. In terms of special effects, film, and a series, we're seeing the burgeoning of those industries. So we see the government paying attention to those industries. And in terms of the community there are many associations that you can participate in. And our co-founder, Alex, is involved with Launch Academy. This is a grassroots accelerator. And they're thinking about how to foster talent and to matchmake talent to businesses and customers. And we need to come up with a way to retain the talent. So the Maple program is in place to help people get working visas with the Canadian government. So there are top-down initiatives from the government, but there are also bottom-up initiatives. So I feel like this is a collaborative environment that we are in so that we can introduce more resources. And because of COVID-19, we're seeing these high-paid jobs in Silicon Valley. Or I should say, there used to be high-paying jobs in Silicon Valley. However, after COVID-19, people feel like they no longer need to live in Silicon Valley because they can work remotely and they can move to cheaper areas. And if they move outside of Silicon Valley, the companies may feel like, well, we don't need to pay them as much. And that creates a kind of cycle that we're seeing. And because of the political changes ongoing in the U.S., a lot of foreign talent can no longer stay in the U.S., and there's a brain drain of these talent to Canada. So we're seeing a gap between Canadian salary compared to the pay in Silicon Valley. So for certain American companies, if they were able to hire talent or a team, they may look towards places like Seattle or cities adjacent to Seattle, such as Vancouver, to make the hires. So in our market, we do work together and we understand our positioning and we harness this kind of geopolitical situation and use it to our advantage so that Vancouver can be up to par to Silicon Valley.
I think you mentioned something that is key. We know that right now a lot of people have invested in the AR/VR industry, but it's still actually at its infancy. So government support is critical. In the last few years, we've discovered through international collaborations that when it comes to the AR/VR industry, it's actually still a very small, select group of people who are involved in it. But people are very optimistic about the future of XR. And they feel that this is an area where we can have more international collaboration so that we can make it more popular. And it was interesting, you mentioned that XR is actually a digital industry. So very often, because it is borderless, you can take it to every corner of the world. So I think that was very, very important. So can you also share, when we look at successful examples overseas, is it possible to import these experiences to Taiwan? Well, actually, this is a huge subject. Due to the pandemic, we can see that originally we were focused on the global market, and now we've had to stop many of these collaborations. Some of the projects that we've had with amusement parks were supposed to last for 2-3 years. So we're hoping that the pandemic is going to end by the middle of next year, so these projects can continue. Originally, we were also involved in licensing with certain brands, and that all has been suspended because of the pandemic. Like many companies out there, we have to now focus solely on the Taiwan market. Taiwan is not sorely hit by the pandemic, so there is still this market. Since January, we've looked at the impact this pandemic has had on our revenue, and we have to say that there is only one business of ours which has to do with a bar in downtown Taipei that has thrived. So people in Taiwan still like to eat, drink, and be merry. But through this period of challenge, I think we've also managed to identify some new applications. And I think this is an area that we are going to be focusing on more in the future. In the past, we were doing well, so we never ever thought of doing A plus B or what is VR plus. We know that VR technology now is being applied in the medical field as well. Also, we can look at how we can work with traditional industries, for such as in traditional training. In the past, training in the traditional manner was a teacher that would talk through many, many slides, and the students probably are falling asleep from boredom. But through VR, you can actually maybe reduce a lot of the duplication and just have VR do a lot of the training for you. So we really feel that this has actually been a moment of transformation for us, the pandemic. I think companies need to react to reality. They need to readjust. So thank you all for sharing such valuable experiences with us. We're now going to begin with our Q&A session. Are there any questions from the floor? We have some questions also here on Slido. This question is for everyone. The question is, if we see people getting back to normal life, so post-pandemic, what do you think the application of VR, AR will be? Any insights? Let me begin. I think we will never return to the old normal, at least for the travel industry. We are going to be entering a new normal phase. Very often when I'm lecturing to students, I like to cite the example of the 911 incident. We will see that the pandemic is going to change people's lifestyle and behavior in a way that you will never return to the past. Today, we know that many tech giants tell their employees that you can work from home forever. You can even move to the countryside. From now on, everybody will work from home. Also, many of the large international conventions where you had companies taking all their employees to Las Vegas, that's not going to be around anymore. We are going to do online meetings in the future with a few select people going to the physical meetings. So it's changed the face of tourism, the way we work. So I think when we look at the future of AR, VR, especially VR, we should imagine when people are not tied to a physical space per se, is there a virtual space that can satisfy them? I think in the future, whether we're talking about the workplace, entertainment, or socializing, this is something we got to think of. I think Facebook is an example. It is a social media. And we've actually been approached by quite a few big conferences. They want to come up with VR solutions for their conferences. Although they didn't all adopt our proposals, but I think people are thinking about fewer physical meetings, more people working from home. People are scattered all over the map. Can we leverage VR so that we can bring people together where we have presence, be it in the social realm, entertainment realm, or for work? I think for the medical industry, this is going to be a very, very important opportunity. Indeed, I think many activities now have gone online and are taking place virtually. So I think we are at a turning point. We have to face many, many challenges due to the pandemic, but ultimately, human beings will find their point of balance. If they can't find something in the physical space, they will probably go online. We used to have many international speakers. They had to fly all the way out to Taiwan. They had to dedicate a special time for Taiwan. But now Sandy is able to connect with us all the way from Canada. So we can see that we were constrained by our imagination in the past. From now on, online, offline are going to work in synchronicity, I think. I think it's even possible to have a hologram of Sandy, and Sandy can appear and connect with us. There is another question here. We know that a lot of people are filled with anticipation about the 5G era. It's going to allow us to speed up connections significantly, and it will impact XR technology. So can you talk a little bit about the future with 5G technology? How will it change our future? I think I can share some ideas in the field of gaming. Right now, many of our applications when it comes to 5G, it has to do with VR helmets. And there are two different kinds of VR helmets, but we can see that right now, most people, they like the helmet that is a single complete headpiece. And very often, when it comes to this kind of equipment, it is unable to give you the best visual quality. However, because of the advent of 5G technology, I think in the future, we will be able to have live streaming on VR. In the past, we were constrained visually, but in the future, because of VR, because of 5G, we probably will have much higher picture resolution. We know that VR helmet can now probably process 2K, and you also have the problem of dizziness. So in the future, if live streaming is much easier due to 5G and we have more bandwidth, then I think this would resolve a lot of the technical barriers that we have right now. So we expect an explosion of new technologies, but many of these technologies are still in development. So we're filled with expectation, but we are still exploring these options. We are waiting and filled with expectation for the future. And Selena? I think right now we already have some ideas about how to work with 5G. I think for museums, this is definitely going to have a huge impact because when we talk about works of art, there is a very, very high standard for picture quality. So once 5G comes into being, we can imagine that coupled with the hardware, we will be able to see even better picture quality, and it will be a better user experience, and the cost will come down. We know that right now there is still the problem of too many people going online looking at something digitally. But I think in the future, with the advent of 5G, this will be resolved. And I don't think it's just for the museum world. I wanted to ask Sandy the final question. However, because of the time constraint. Our time is up, unfortunately. I want to thank all of our speakers for joining us for this session. Thank you, Sandy, for joining us from Vancouver. I think this has been a very fruitful meeting, and we have a lot more room for imagination. We hope in the future we can continue to interact and collaborate. Once again, a very warm round of applause to all of our speakers. Thank you. Thank you.
台的演说，那我们请先站起来，在台上留步一下，我们要做一个合照。工作人员请协助椅子的部分。那 Sandy 也请在线上跟我们做一个 virtual 的大合照。